I would have to say that social media doesn't mobilise anybody, ever, and it never will. In the same way as a typewriter doesn't mobilise anybody, and it never will. People mobilise people, and then they use different tools to make that work, and I think that this is an important thing to do. To talk of the failure of social media has as much relevance as the failure of typewriters, or the failure, I mean, they're tools that we use. We use them when we use them, and they're necessary. However, I would also say that these tools allow possibly for a qualitative difference in the way they can be used. For the first time in a long time, the means of media production have been put into the hands of everyday people in their daily lives. The single biggest mobilizing factor, I think, in any social change, that's wrong. The biggest single tool, I think, that people will use in social change will be the mobile phone. I think that text messaging is probably one of the best social media organising tools that there are. Text messaging in Ethiopia was used to drop a government, or at least to force the elections through and to have an elected change of a representative government, which then didn't occur. And the first thing that the old government did, the non-elected old government did, was to shut off all text message traffic in the country. You can no longer send text messages in Ethiopia. A reasonable response from an unreasonable government, we would say. So so that's one answer to it. That these are tools. The tools will be used by people to mobilise. People will always mobilise. We always have. Struggle will continue on all sorts of levels: social, economic, political, social. No problem there. Or every single problem that we've always had there is still there. The second thing I would say is that I didn't want to answer the question, so I asked my network. When Cecilia said that this is what we will do, I sent out a tweet to my Twitter network and asked them what the best social media campaign was. And that was, 10, 12, 14 minutes ago. I've gotten 30 responses from people telling me campaigns that they thought were campaigns that were social media campaigns. And I would say that this is a way that these social media tools are changing the way things are done. The fact that I can sit here and ask for help from a network of engaged people all over the globe, and I've gotten answers from every single continent except Antarctica, which is, I believe, a continent where the polar bears don't text as yet. I've gotten, and for me, this is a dramatic change. It means that I am able to involve and be involved in global discussions, no matter where I am. From right here, I can pull people in from anywhere around the world to give the input that I can't give, to give the background that I don't have, to give the emotional responses that aren't my emotional responses, but that are important to every single discussion. So I would say that social media tools will allow us to broaden, to deepen the discussions that we have in the mobilisations that we need to do. And then it's also important to remember that when we talk about these mobilisations, they are mobilisations by anybody. Communists will use these to mobilise other communists. Trotskyists will use these to mobilise masses of people in demonstrations throughout the world, hopefully. I personally use them in my personal daily life, I use them in my political life, I use them in my emotional life. These are becoming part of the way I live, not part of an alternative communication structure, but part of an integrated part of the way I live. And this will also make a change. It will make a change in the way we see ourselves in relationship to the societies that we're in. It will make a change in the way we see ourselves as individuals in groups. It suddenly means that I have my group with me everywhere I go, because they are there in my cell phone. I'm no more alone. It does make a difference. And so all of these levels are being changed by the tools that we use, but it's still never going to be the tools that make the change. In Sweden, there was a law passed that allows the government to look into every form of electronic messaging from cell phones to Facebook groups to everything. The Swedish government has a law that allows the Swedish government much more insight than any of your security forces are legally allowed to do. And there was a campaign against that. That was one campaign. There was a campaign for David Isak, who is a Swedish citizen who is in prison in Ethiopia, a journalist who had double citizenship, who was done. There was the Obama campaign was mentioned. Wikipedia. How many of you use Wikipedia? Wikipedia is a social media tool. This is one of the big success stories of social media. The Birmingham City Plan in Birmingham, where they have decided to revamp the city, a huge social media campaign arose to influence the way that city plan was done. There was, the one I really like is the one I will take last. There was, I believe the technical term is a shitload. There is a long list of things here. But the one I particularly like myself best, and the one I would probably have done, is the Ushandi, which is the using cell phones to map reports of post-election violence in Kenya. After the elections in Kenya, there was a lot of violence from different factions, and using the cell phone as a way to map the violence throughout the Kenyan society, I think was a very, very useful and very successful way to use social media as a tool to protect and a tool to inform. This question of how do we step out of the virtual and into the physical, I think is the way of phrasing the question shows that you don't understand the changes that have occurred in society, I would say. Because there is no virtual and there is no physical, that is a divide. People's communication lives are integrated. There is an integrated communicative life that we lead. To say that sitting in front of the computer is less useful than reading a newspaper or is less engaging than being in the library, I think is counterproductive and is one of the reasons why mainstream media, old school mainstream media, is dying, and the quicker the better. I would also say that one of the main successes of social media in general.
Okay, now you have 10 seconds.
Yeah, I thought that one would get me killed. I would say that one of the main successes in social media is actually the undermining of mainstream media's total control over the flow of news and information, and the placement of the means of media production into the hands of ordinary people who before didn't have a voice. It used to be the case that we in the mainstream media used to say we are the voice of the people. The people are now saying fuck off, we have our own voices, and I think it's about time.